Okay, looks like we're in business. Well, as Steve has been moving along here in varying chapters in Daniel, it fell my lot to do Daniel chapter 2, which is very interesting because well, you'll see. Daniel chapter 2 is a very interesting passage, even though it no, I hate this thing. Trying to get a backup. There, now I got the backup running. But Daniel is a very, very interesting book. And as you have heard from Steve, there's lots of interesting things in Daniel. And there are things in Daniel that are relevant to our generation, believe it or not. We're going to see the image today of Daniel chapter 2 that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. And the conclusion of the image, well, basically was an image which characterized empires which are going to rule over basically the known world, starting when Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then finally a 10-toed kingdom. Well, that 10-toed kingdom is one yet to arrive on the scene, as best we know. But if you'll notice, Babylon's been here and gone. Medo-Persia, here and gone. Greece, here and gone. Rome, no longer. So there's only one left. So what does that tell you? To those that would say, well, you never know when the Lord's going to come. Well, we've been through everything. There's only kingdom left. And so that, in my view, is, well, more information that tells us that we are here at the end of the age. So today, any questions about what Steve has covered up to this point? I thought he did a wonderful job. I just wished we could have got that last lesson on YouTube. Yes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say to his, that he couldn't get it. If anyone's looking for it, he couldn't get it up.
Now maybe we can come back to it another time. We've been known to do that. And so we'll do Daniel chapter 2 now. Now, I believe next Sunday, Pat and Gary are not going to be here, but the following Sunday after that, they're going to be back, and I think about everybody be here. And I would like to do at that time the Star of Bethlehem. If you all haven't seen that, that is worth the price of admission.
What was that?
The Star of Bethlehem.
Oh, okay.
It's a DVD. A lawyer in Texas put it together. And if you ever wanted to know what the Star of Bethlehem really was, well, you'll need to come then. So that will be not next Sunday, but the following Sunday. We're going to do that because it's relevant because we're coming up here on Christmas. And I kind of like to show that the Bible doesn't stand all by itself. You know, over here in the secular world, there are things going on that the Bible talks about, but we don't really connect the two most of the time. And in fact, there are a lot of people make their living on trying to show that the Bible is irrelevant. They believe that life just came about by some evolutionary process. And now that they're finding out that their processes don't work, and there are people who have evolutionary biologists behind their PhD, they ain't worth much anymore. Because we're learning that evolution doesn't work. It can't work. And so now they're saying, well, it doesn't work. That must have meant that life on this planet was transposed here. They call it transpermia, where life landed here. And they won't give credit to God for it, but they'll give credit to some alien for it. Yeah, some ancient astronaut planted it here. If you've been watching that series on, I guess it's the Discovery Channel, some ancient astronaut planted life here. Oh, I don't think so. But there's more to the story, as we will learn today. We've got miles to go before we sleep. So, we've reviewed last lesson from 2nd Esdras. Remember Esdras? Book that didn't quite make it into the scripture, but it was in the 1611 King James. And I thought it was kind of relevant. If you read what 2nd Esdras has to say here, it says, so when there shall appear in the world quakes, tumult of peoples, plots of the heathen, wavering of leaders, confusion of princes, then you will understand that it was these things that the Most High spoke of from the days that were of old, from the beginning. For the more the world grows weak with age, the more evils will increase upon those that live in it, and truth will more and more retire, and falsehood draw near. Now, I don't think you would have any trouble in finding truth retiring in this generation and falsehood drawing near. So just interesting words. 2nd Ezra says, when you see those things, well, hey, you're at the end. I think maybe he's right. Okay, now for the rest of the story, there was a passage in Genesis which reads, Genesis 6:3, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his day will be 120 years. You all probably remember reading that. And there are those who say, well, you know, Adam, would he live to be 930 years? Methuselah, 969 years. They used to live a long time. And so the argument here is, well, man used to live a long time. Well, I'm cutting that back. Only 120 now. Well, there's more story. The word for years here is the Hebrew word shana, which means years, but it also means division. So it's not necessarily year, but it can be. Maybe it means both. There is a book called the Book of Jubilees. Now, I don't know if this is what it looks like if you go to the bookstore. It's kind of an interesting book, but it breaks time down into Jubilee periods. How much is a Jubilee? 50 years. So it would say that a Jubilee being 50 years, well, there's kind of an interesting note here in the book, 1st chapter. In the margin notes it says, both words used in the original, I can't read. The Book of Divisions is the name by which this book is known by the Abyssinians, called the Book of Divisions, not the Book of Jubilees, implying that the word Jubilee and divisions may be synonymous to some degree. Now, we can perhaps rewrite Genesis 6:3 to say the following, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 divisions. Now, if the writer was intending that Jubilee to mean a division, or the division to mean a Jubilee, then 120 Jubilees are 6,000 years. It's possible that it could mean both. But you wonder, where did the Jews get the idea that there were 6,000 years appointed to the descendants of Adam? This might be one place. There may be a direct reference here in Genesis 3 that tells us basically, here's the time for man, 6,000 years. And of course, we know that's what the Jews teach. The rabbis and the sages of Judaism in their ancient books all say that time is 6,000 years followed by a 7,000 year period, which we would call the millennial kingdom. And they call it the time of, what do they call it? Well, at any rate, it's the time when Israel now is back on the top of the heap, and they are no longer being downtrodden. So, something to think about. Okay, Daniel chapter 2. Now in 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar was laying siege to Jerusalem, and he was in the process of, taking the city and setting up his own organization there. And when he had learned that his father had died back in Babylon, so he leaves the siege, puts it in the hands of others, goes back to Babylon, and he assumes the throne. He becomes the king of Babylon now. And evidence shows that when he returned, he was not altogether happy with the organization his father had. And particularly, he wasn't very happy and held the Chaldeans, the magicians, and these other people, he held those in jaundiced view. He thought they were all a bunch of con men, basically. And it looks like, from that perspective, well, we'll go on with the story here, but you kind of understand where he's at right now. Now here's Daniel chapter 2, and in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled and his sleep from him. Then the king commanded the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. Pretty standard operating procedure. Got a dream? You want to know what it means? You go to the dream interpreters, Chaldeans, the magicians, and so forth. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show you the interpretation. Sounds fair. You show me the dream, I'll show you what it means. But you know, in the back of Nebuchadnezzar's mind, he's thinking, these guys, I'd like to get rid of them. I don't think they can do anything. I think they're a bunch of charlatans. I think they're a bunch of con men. I'm going to get rid of them. There is an implication here that, well, Nebuchadnezzar really did remember the dream. He just wanted to see if they remembered the dream. And the king answered to the Chaldeans, this thing is gone from me. If you will not make known to me the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall be into pieces, and your houses be made into dunghills. This is not good. If you can't perform, you are not only out of here, but your house is out of here, your family's out, and your house is going to be made a dunghill. Not a good ending. But if you show me the dream, on the other hand, and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards, great honor, and therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. Wow. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servant the dream, and we will show him the interpretation. Not taking it, the king answered and said to him, I know of certainty that you would gain the time. In other words, you're stalling, because you see the thing is gone for me. I don't think it was really gone. But if you will not make known to me the dream, there is one decree for you, for you have prepared lying and corrupt words. You see, he knew that in the times past, these fellows have been terribly unreliable, based on this verse. So he was going to get rid of them. And he could do that. He was the king. And you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. He's letting them off the hook. The Chaldeans answered and said to the king, there's not a man upon the earth that can show the king this matter. Therefore, no king, lord, nor ruler has ever asked such a thing of a magician, an astrologer, or a Chaldean. They were right. There was no man on the earth that could do that. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Well, they got that right. There is nobody that can reveal this secret to the king except not gods, but singular God. For this cause the king was angry and furious, and he commanded to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He was getting rid of the whole lot of them. We are going to have an organizational change right here. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain because they were a part of the tribe, of the group there, of the Chaldeans.
At this time, was Daniel the Magi, as we learned last week, the head of the...
No, he was just a regular guy. He was a student, and he was studying, and but he was definitely not the head. But this is why he was the head Magi. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. And he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why the decree is so hasty from the king. And Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. And just stepping in front of the king, you put your neck on the chopping block because you just don't go before the king. So the king apparently was kind of inclined to, well, at least wait this one out, see what this kid can do. Then Daniel went to his house, and he made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. And they would desire the mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel at night in a vision, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Well, you know, when Daniel went and prayed, that was one prayer session that was probably pretty intense. And Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes times and seasons, he removes kings, he setteth up kings, he gives wisdom to the wise, knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Daniel, he's given all the credit to God. You know, typical bureaucrats in this day and age, oh, I figured it out. It's all my doing. I did it. No, not with Daniel. I thank thee and praise thee, O God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, that thou mightst make known unto me what we desired of thee. For thou hast made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went in and said unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. And so Arioch brought Daniel before the king in haste, and said unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. See, he's still classified as a captive of Judah, even though he was among Chaldeans at that time. And the king answered to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar. And I think Steve told us what that name meant, and I don't remember what it was.
Prince of Baal.
What was it?
Prince of Baal.
Prince of Baal. Sounds like it. Prince of Baal. So we've got a counterfeit god here. So, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? And Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot not the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and make known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the later days. Thy dream and thy visions upon thy head are these. Daniel is about to nail it. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter, and he revealeth secrets and make known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living man, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou know the thoughts of thy heart. Daniel continues to put the credit where it belongs, to God. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before me, and the form thereof was terrible. The word terrible really doesn't mean terrible. It means more like awesome. This is an awesome thing. And the image's head was of fine gold. Its breasts and its arms were of silver. Its belly and thighs were of brass. And its legs of iron, and its feet part of iron and part of clay. Now there is a strange vision. No doubt why Nebuchadnezzar couldn't remember it, if he really couldn't remember it. This is a strange thing. This is not like remembering a horse or a cow or a pig. This thing doesn't exist. This is a nondescript beast of some sort. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet that were of iron and clay, and brake it into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold, broken into pieces together, and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, and there was no place found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the earth. Here we have, in a nutshell, the big picture of Daniel. And then from this point on, there's going to be more information, more detail. And, detail's where all the fun is. This is the dream, and we tell the interpretation thereof before the king. O thou king, thou art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given to thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air of heaven, hath he given into thy hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all, for thou art the head of gold. Well, he's got to be feeling good. I'm the top dog. I'm the head. I'm gold, more precious than silver. And after, let's see, and wheresoever the children, I hate it when I do that. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and a third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all of the earth. All of the earth. I didn't know Babylon reigned over all of the earth, and these other kingdoms over all of the earth. That word in Hebrew is Haaretz.
Same as the flood.
Same as the flood. He didn't dwell over the entire world, but the entire land or country. There's a difference. Ponder that, because in a few weeks, I'm going to take you on a journey through Genesis and show you something you probably haven't seen. Of course, you probably have all heard all this stuff before, right? And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh into pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron breaketh all of these, shall it break into pieces and bruise. Now we've got head of gold, shoulders of silver. Now we know the head is Babylon. Later we'll figure out that the shoulders and the arms are Medo-Persia. They are silver. And if you look at the densities of gold, it's about twice the density of silver. And then from silver to brass, there's another considerable difference in the densities of them. So we're going down in densities, we're going down in value. Gold more valuable than silver, silver more than brass, brass more than iron, and then iron mixed with clay. I don't even know how you describe that. It doesn't work. It doesn't bind together. Whereas thou sawest feet and toes and part of otter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. Miry clay. Basically, that's dusty dirt. Sometimes his finger doesn't work. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. We're going to talk about this in a minute. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. What kingdom are we talking about?
Christ.
Absolutely. He is the stone kingdom. And when he comes, he hits these kingdoms which are currently in control of the earth, the land. He hits them right where they stand, and they are all just blown to smithereens, and they are no longer. And the important thing is that that kingdom will never be removed. It will be there. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is sure. And King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer oblation and sweet odors unto him. He is now on top of the world. And the king answered to Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords and revealer of secrets, and seeing that thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, the chief governors over the wise men of Babylon. This is where he got his title. He was the Rab Magi. Then Daniel requested the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Daniel got the best job, but he got his buddies really good jobs also. But the interesting thing is, Nebuchadnezzar basically acknowledged that there is a God in heaven and that from him all these things came. Now, Chuck Missler, in his series on this, he says, we expect to see Nebuchadnezzar in heaven because he made the great statement. He made a statement of faith that there is a God and that he is in control. Now, if you've ever done a study of Daniel chapter 2, this is probably the way it went. Just the way I went through it. There's one glaring detail that Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, and as iron is not mixed with clay. Take a look at this very closely. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. What do you get from that? Who is they?
You want me to cheat and tell you?
Tell
Satan's seed,
Hmm?
Satan's seed.
Oh, you must have been cheating.
I told her before class.
Oh, he stole all my
No,
thunder.
I didn't. I'm teasing.
The they is distinguished from the seed of men. Who is the they? They do not cleave one to another. We are talking about another entity here. Who are we talking about? If we skipped over into Daniel 11, 38 and 39, it says, "But in his estate he shall honor the God of forces, a God whom his fathers knew not. He honor with gold, silver, and precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase glory, and he shall cause them," who's them? Strange God. "To rule over many and shall divide the land for gain." Strange God? Well, that word strange God can be interpreted legitimately. Alien angel. The alien angels apparently are more than one, and he is setting them up to rule. Alien angels? Where do we get alien angels from? Genesis 3, 14 and 15, "And the Lord God said to the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all the cattle and above every beast of the field, and upon thy belly thou shalt go, and dust shall thou eat till the end of thy days, or end of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise his head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." Who is the seed of Satan? Who is that? We're talking about something, some entity that is the seed of Satan. And we know a little more information about this seed of Satan. You know, we have a paradigm. When you were taught in school, you have this big picture of where we are in the universe, how we got here, and that man started from some microbial piece of fuzz in a pond in distant times past and just magically became this wonderful, complicated creature in which we have today. And that if you follow their logic, everything works except the evidence of the earth never supports that at all. You come along in time and all of a sudden, boom, you've got all these creatures on the planet. They were not there, then they were there. And then a catastrophe happens and they're not there. And then they are there. There is no time in between, according to the geologic column and the information we see buried in the dirt, that there was ever any evolutionary process. And now there is beings that we are finding in the dirt that don't belong there. We can't figure out where they go, and so we ignored them. If you get the paper back in 1800s, you will find in Santa Catalina Island, there was an anthropologist who explored caves there, and you know what he found? Giants. 10 feet, 8 feet long, double rows of teeth, 6 fingers. Where do these fit? They don't fit. So what did they do with them? They ignored them. Our paradigm has been the result of deception. We have been deceived. That information is all over ancient papers, and it shows that the bodies, the skeleton remains, were taken and given to the Smithsonian. Go to the Smithsonian today and ask to see them. You won't find them. We don't know what they did with them, but it's case after case after case.
That found, well, you said some name of a place where they found.
Santa Catalina Island, that's one place. They were also in Ohio. There's also, well, they're all over the New Mexico. The ancient Indians, as you may have heard me say, when they come up to meet the cavalry, this is their salute. You know why they do that?
5 fingers.
Show that they had 5 fingers. Because if you had 6 fingers, their history said those people were crazy. They were giants, they had 6 fingers, and there is I believe it's the Cherokees have, maybe it was the Apaches, they have a myth about these creatures that were roaming the plains generations ago, 30 feet tall, running down the plains, catching buffalo up in one arm, they're still running, and tearing them to pieces and eating them on the run. They were scared to death of these things. And when they found them, or any of their relatives, they killed them. And vice versa. They also ate men. This is part of the American Indian lore. And so, why haven't we been taught any of this? Genesis 6, and it came to pass, while men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of the gods saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took of them wives of chose. Sons of gods. In other words, B'nai Elohim. Now that word Elohim is frequently translated angel. Sons of the angels. And the Lord said, my spirit will not always strive with man, and for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years, which we've already talked about. The sons of the gods. Now there are those who have interpreted that and said, sons of the gods. Well, that means probably the sons of Seth. They were a higher moral being than the sons of Cain, because Cain was an evil guy. And so they try to make the argument that it was the sons of Seth. That's what that really means. It didn't mean sons of God. Except when you go over in Job and it talks about the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, appearing before God in heaven. That kind of pretty much eliminates the sons of Seth as that explanation. There were, on planet Earth, the sons of God. If you read a book called The Prophecies of the Book of Enoch, gives you more detail about that. And why should we believe Enoch? Well, let me finish Genesis 6 and I'll get back to this. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, okay? During these days, also after. After what? After the flood. When the sons of the gods came into the daughters of men, and they bare them children, the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. Now, Jude. Remember reading Jude, and it had the strange things about the angels that committed adultery? Jude 6, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains unto darkness, unto the judgment of that great day. These are the B'nai Elohim. Well, it's not the B'nai Elohim, it's the Elohim, the angels. These angels were on the earth. They had relations with the daughters of men, and the result of that relationship were giants. That's where the giants came in, and it blows this, evolutionary picture all up. So we can't have that, so how do we handle it? Ignore it. Now the interesting thing is that the prophecies of Jude in Jude 14 and 15 are lifted right out of the book of Enoch. So whatever the book of Enoch has to say about this event might be of interest, right? I mean, if Jude is in the Bible, and the Bible is the ordained word of God, and the Bible references another book, I'd say it's worth looking at, wouldn't you? Well, I looked at it. Let's see what it says. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, to convince all of the that are ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all of their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Book of Enoch. Now I'm going to read Enoch chapter 6. Gives you some interesting detail. And it came to pass, when the sons of men had multiplied in those days, and were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters, the angels, the children of heaven, saw after them, and said one to another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives among the children of men, and beget us children. They wanted to be God. And Shemaiah, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have the penalty of great sin. And they all answered and said to him, Let us then all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual execrations, it says imprecations, a mutual oath, not to abandon this plan, but to do the thing. Then they swear all together, and bound themselves by mutual oath upon it, and they were in all 200. who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecation or a mutual oath upon it. That's why Hermon has its name. It means oath. The angels apparently came down on Mount Hermon, 200 of them, and that's where they started their evil deeds. And all others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms, enchantments, the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant and bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells. I don't know how far an ell is. Somebody can look that up. Pretty tall. Who consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when the men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Now, here's the outcome of them. The spirits of the giants shall be like clouds, which shall oppress, corrupt, fall, contend, and bruise upon the earth. According to the American Indians, that's exactly what they did. And they shall cause lamentation. No food shall they eat. They shall be thirsty. They shall be concealed. And those spirits shall rise up against the sons of men and women, for they come forth during the days of slaughter and destruction. These spirits, according to Enoch, have a mission. Once they die, and I forgot to put that part in here, but it basically said, once these giants die, that's the end of them. But they are half mortal and half immortal. And it says, the mortal side is going to die and return to dust. But the immortal side is going to remain on the earth, and they are going to be called evil spirits. Now, how can you account for the fact that some places in the world have never known peace at all? Namely, the region around the Tigris and Euphrates River. How come that region of the world has never known peace for any period of time at all? Well, according to Revelations, between the Tigris and Euphrates River, a bunch of these spirits are bound, and apparently they have control over that. Why was Daniel withheld for 3 weeks when he came? I'm sorry, not Daniel, but Michael held up for 3 weeks. How come? He was fighting who? The Prince of Persia. Who is the Prince of Persia? One of these angelic beings, one of these angelic demons. Remember when Christ was being tempted, Satan took him up on a high place and showed him the whole world and said, look, see all these kingdoms, all this stuff, it's all mine. You bow down and worship me and I'll give it all to you. Nice. The interesting thing about that is Jesus never debated his right. He had possession of the whole world. And in my view still does, and there's evidence of it everywhere. So the story gets deeper. Apparently there were angels, they had relations. It was the immortal part of that relationship of these B'nai Elohim, also called the Nephilim, the fallen ones. When they had progeny on the earth, they were called giants, Gibborim in the Hebrew, and they did evil on this earth, and when they died, their spirits remained. This, in 12/16/12, yes, December 16th, 2012. Time gets away so fast. This was a dig in Mexico, in Sonora. They found 30 skeletons like this. These skeletons had elongated heads. And if you will ask an anthropologist, how do you account for this? They will tell you that it was cradle headboarding, right? You take the baby and you tie its head to a board when it's young and squashes its brain up and goes straight up. One of the things about cradle headboarding is when you do that, the back of the baby's head is flat as the board because it's being pressed into the board. The back of this creature's head, perfectly round. Not only is it perfectly round, it is 25% larger than a human brain, It has no frontal suture. All human brains have a frontal suture. It has no frontal suture. They did a DNA analysis of it. Not human. Not only is it not human, it's so far not human that it can't even breed with humans. And if it tried, there would be no progeny. This being is a different sort. Where did it come from?
According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, an L is about 18 inches.
3,000 L's? Maybe a translational issue here. I don't think we had people 3,000
We're
feet
saying
tall.
six hand breadths.
6 handbreadths is an L?
An Egyptian L. They had a common L and a royal L. The common was 6 hand breadths, and the royal was 7.
I think I would question that.
They were saying 2/3 of an L equal to foot.
2/3 of an L.
Which would have
Well,
been-
that sounds like we may have got a translational issue there. But
That would be
that's
very
way.
large.
But whatever it was big. Pretty big. Now these, remember L.A. Marzulli and his film? These are some of the heads that were found, hundreds of them, down in Venezuela. And there's somebody trying to prevent this information from becoming public. He's having a hard time getting the information out, but they have done preliminary DNA analysis on them, and same story. They're not human. They got the same problem. No frontal suture. The head's 25% larger brain capacity than human and 60% heavier than a human brain. There is something, this is non-human, and there is no evidence of any head boarding. In fact, they found infants. Well, they're not infants. They were,
Fetuses, right?
what do they got?
Fetus.
Fetus. Same shape of skull. How can you headboard a fetus? So these beings have been around. Now the story even gets more interesting. This is bizarre. I found this next slide on the internet, and I saw it one day, and the next day I came back and it was gone. And so it just plopped up there, and you can find it now. But at one time, somebody didn't want this thing on the internet.
Where these photographs were taken, or what?
I only know they were in Venezuela. If you go online and type in, let's see, how did I get there? Cone-shaped skulls. And it'll show you where they came from. There's the graduate from Yale. Her name is Karen Hudds, and she's the World Bank counselor from 1980 to 2007. She has the opportunity to move with the movers and shakers of the world, and she frequently had opportunity to meet with representatives of the Vatican Bank. And she's, in one of her long exposés, in the middle of it, she says, she believes that Homo capensis, that's what those cone heads were called, are forms of a master race, leading elite organizations and using as slaves without knowledge. Hudds recently announced during an interview about monetary policy that there are a second species on this planet and they're not extraterrestrial. Their skulls are all over the place on the earth because they have been with us. But after the Ice Age, there weren't that many of them, so they've been in hiding, and one of the places they've been hiding is in the Vatican. And that's why the Vatican wears those crazy mitres. Now, you'd say, this woman's nuts. The only thing is, out of the blue, about 2 years ago, the Vatican comes online and makes an edict about extraterrestrials. And it says, because God made the extraterrestrials too, and so they're probably closer to God than we are, and so they may come and they may have a different gospel, and we probably should go ahead and listen to them. You never heard that, did you? It was from the Vatican. It was one of their edicts or something. Why would you say such a thing?
About when was that?
It was about 2012. And so the Vatican, and right now the Vatican is doing all sorts of strange things. They have their own telescopes. They've got one in New Mexico. They've got 2 in the Vatican City. And for some reason, they are scanning the skies for something. Don't know what's going on here. But the interesting thing is that this kingdom of iron mixed with clay precipitates out of the legs of iron And who were the legs of iron? Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Those two legs come out of Rome. And so whatever this Roman influence is has something to do with this mingling of miry clay and iron. So don't be surprised in the near future if you hear something coming out of the Vatican about beings, extraterrestrial beings. According to what I understand, Karen Huddes met with some of these things, and they were allegedly in control of things in the Vatican. Is that true or not? I don't know. It's on the internet. It must be true. But it seems to fall in line with what we read in the scripture. And my belief is that in the near future, there is going to be a revelation that our country and others have been dealing with beings that have been giving us advanced technology. If you will read, as we just did in Enoch, what did those creatures do to mankind when they came? They gave them advanced technology, showed them how to read or how to make pharmaceuticals out of roots, showed them how to make iron, and so they could make weapons, so they could kill each other more efficiently. So wouldn't it be logical that if they were coming again during the days of slaughter to man, that they would show man higher technology? There's any number, if you watch the Discovery Channel, the ancient aliens or ancient UFOs or whatever, occasionally you'll have a pilot come on, like one did in the recent past, who testified that while he was flying over Area 51, they told him to make a hard left turn for no good reason. But you got to do what they tell you. So as he was making a hard left turn, he looked out over his window and saw Area 51, and he saw these lights just landing, about 12 of them, landing in ways that airplanes can't maneuver. And so you get that along with these other people who claim that Area 51, you know, there are aliens there. There are several people. Bob Lazar, number one. If you go on the internet, type in the name Bob Lazar, L-A-Z-R. He's one who came on television in Nevada and said that, oh yeah, I worked in Area 51, and I worked in an area called S4, and our job was to back engineer alien UFOs. We got 9 of them, and they work by principle of gravitation generation. They have 3 gravity generators. They're powered by an element called ununpentium, which appears in area 115 on the periodic table. And it has the ability to amplify gravity because the gravitational field extends beyond the limits of the molecule and, blah, 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 and all sorts of stuff. And somehow, by virtue of that material, they can warp space and time. And so when you see the craft moving like this and making 90-degree turns, the occupants inside feel no effect of the turn because they have been surrounded by their own gravitational field. It went on and on, way over my head, but sounds like somebody had an interesting story to tell. And it goes on to say that these beings have been, apparently, have a contract or an agreement with the governments of the world that they're allowed to do certain things. And one of them is they take people and extract their DNA. And I mean, it gets bizarre. Now, if you really, really want to get freaked out, go on the internet and type in the word Serpco. Serpo, S-E-P-H-O, S-E-R-P-H-O, Serpo. And you will find a story, to be believed or not, that there is a galaxy in a region called Zeta Reticuli. And back in 1979, a group of astronauts returned from there. Remember the story, what was it? Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where they had the ship that landed, and then these guys go marching on as the aliens came off? Apparently, that came from this story, that back in the 60s, we were in contact with this alien group. They came, sent a ship, and sent 90 tons of stuff back to this place, 39 light years away, and they stayed there. 3 of them died. They all came back in 1979, what was left of them. And they went on and told stories about these beings that they were in contact with at the time. Zeta Reticuli, 39 light years away, but their ship made it in 9 months. I mean, lots of bizarre stuff. Is it to be believed? I don't know, but I got a feeling coming up soon, somebody is going to come up and explain to us that, oh, by the way, you know, you people, you're not a product of God. You're a product of the aliens, and we've already been to see them. And they came and seeded our planet. Evolution really doesn't work. These people are really our gods. They created us. And they are going to have such a persuasive story to tell because our scientists have planted this seed and they are going to nourish it. Yes?
I grew up in Amarillo, and my friend Paul Atkinson, that sometimes comes with me, did, and he is from New Mexico, Fort Sumner, New Mexico. He used to go back to see his grandparents, and when he was about 5 or 6 years old, which would be the early 1950s, he and his cousins were outside playing, and they saw balls of fire that did, like explosions, that did not make any sound at all, and they all ran to their grandmother's house. Now, I grew up in Amarillo, and my father was a rocket scientist for Pantex, the nuclear energy plant. And we heard these stories all the time growing up, that people in Amarillo were seeing, they were seeing things like those things landing and taking off. Now, you know, our government experiments, and Germany experimented with anti-gravity kind of things, and a lot of the German scientists were brought to America during World War II. And so whether these are extraterrestrial or these are things that men have created, there is something that is going on, because Paul was an eyewitness of something like this, and there was supposedly within the last 2 years a huge explosion in the Ural Mountains in Russia, and again there was no sound to the explosion, and somebody videotaped it, and it's online. I can't remember where.
I haven't seen that.
I saw that on, but but I believe that, I mean, when you talk about it, if you've never grown up hearing any of this, you think, is this
These
man
people are
crazy?
nuts.
I
Yeah.
mean, but I've grown up hearing these things my entire life.
Interesting you should mention that explosion with no sound.
Yeah.
Bob Lazar, in one of his pieces, reported he took some of his buddies out. He wasn't supposed to, obviously, but he knew when they were testing these things. And so he took them out to a region of Area 51 where you could watch the test flights and said, there's going to be a test flight tonight. We can go out and watch it. And they filmed it. And sure enough, it comes straight up, goes straight over, straight back, straight up. And then it said it exploded. And they were all waiting for the concussion, but there was none. It was just like a big flash of light and then nothing. So there's something consistent here about that tale. And once again, as time goes on, we'll find out more details. But I'm just pointing out to you here, in the scripture, there is evidence that there's something extra human going on here. These B'nai Elohim are real. And they have left their seeds around the earth, and they are there for us to see. How this is all going to develop, I don't know. But it's something, well, at least now you're warned. You won't be too surprised if it happens. Yes?
Well, it's the great deception for those that are not looking for it.
Yeah, I have a suspicion about the way things are going to happen. And, you know, we're all guaranteed.
5 minutes to tell them.
Okay, I just got 5 minutes. We're all guaranteed to trip out of here. How's that happen? When I say guaranteed, there is a generation that's guaranteed that one time the Lord's going to return. And how are we going to meet him? In the air. And apparently it's a visible thing. When he comes, we're all going to be clothed with righteousness. We're going to get white robes. This clothes, that's going away. We're going to meet him in the air. And when we meet him in the air, it's going to be a visible thing. All the time, and I really believe this is going to happen. How is the world going to miss the event? How are they not going to say, oh my word, what happened to those people? Would make me want to go immediately and search and find out what's unique about these people, right? What if, as soon as we are up there and we just are gone, the whole sky is filled with UFOs, little bots of light, and they come sailing down and say, oh oh, by the way, these people, they didn't get with the program. So we had to take them off the planet, and we are really your gods. And, you know, we have this capability of high technology, and so we're going to take over now. And the passage there that we read in Daniel about he's going to assign leaders of them, these foreign gods, these alien angels, over regions of the world, makes more sense all the time, doesn't it? And isn't it interesting how, I don't know about you, I read those passages 1,000 times, never picked up on that. And thanks to old Chuck Missler, he's always one that's picking up on things like that. We now know that there is something more going on here. And as time goes on, there is a great deception coming. And now you won't be surprised when you see it, because it's been there all along. It's in the scriptures. Any more questions? Any more observations?
On the same channel, we were watching something called In Search of Giants.
Mm-hmm.
It was another show about two construction workers who were trying to locate giants in various parts of the U.S. No biblical context to it whatsoever. It's just like this is a hobby of theirs. They just see, they go through newspaper clippings in libraries and see pictures of giant skeletons that have been unearthed, and you know, they're like, oh, look, it does exist, so we know what we're looking for. And there's all of this evidence. We were watching that right after we had talked about the Netflix the other day as Marzulli was on. We had seen that show, and we watched that.
I bet you they'll find one here pretty quick.
Discovery or one of those channels, but there was no biblical reference to it whatsoever.
No,
it was just,
isn't that
we're looking for
interesting?
giants. Somehow they're just some kind of anomaly, and we're just going to go find these skeletons.
Isn't it interesting? Well, look for them to find one here pretty quick. And then the anthropologists of the time are going to have to scratch their heads. The evolutionary biologists are going to have to scratch their heads and explain why they're right and why they're...
Well, the extraterrestrials have been a good diversion, because you know, we're thinking about little short men, 4 feet tall,
right,
and green, and we're not thinking about looking for these
giants.
These giants. So that has kind of been a diversion, convenient diversion from that. And now as those come up, then the rapture happens, and these extraterrestrials come down, and so now we've got...
Doesn't it look like we're just being
explanation.
perfectly set up? I mean, this is a great deception. Give it to Satan. He is really smart. And like the scripture says, except God's intervention, even the elect would be confused and deluded. So Satan is a master of deception, as Johnny mentioned in his sermon this morning. And so don't put it past him to pull off something like this. He's bound to. He's got seed somewhere, according to Genesis. Seed of Satan is around, and that's the one we're going to be where Christ eventually defeats. And so...
And do you think they're spread out all over the world, or do you think they're in a certain area, a certain country or region?
You know, these Conehead people, I don't know where they all are, but we find evidence of them on this everywhere. We find them everywhere, and according to Karen Hutt, they're in the Vatican. So maybe they're already here. But I don't know about you, but every time I see a war come up, and particularly in the case of George Bush, when he was president, I never could understand why we were going to war with Iraq. I know what we were told. And when I looked at his body language, he was not comfortable with what he was saying. I think he was not telling us the truth. And when he talked about the weapons of mass destruction, that he didn't know where they were, if you've watched that interview, he could not look at the camera and say he didn't know where they were. They knew where they were. They were pulled out by the Russian Spetsnaz and moved into Syria, where we're finding them today. Why did he... why did
and
we
he
go
won't
into
come out
Iraq?
today and say, I told you so.
He
I
won't
told you they
say
were there.
And he said an interesting thing once while he was being asked about, Obama and his administration and where things were going and was he comfortable with it. He said something interesting. He said, well, the President of the United States can't really do very much, implying that there was some restraining force on him or something in the background that we don't know about. So, who owns planet Earth? Satan. How does he operate? Well, certainly he operates on men's subconscious, but I think he also has beings here. And how they relate, I don't know yet. But there is a seed of Satan, and that maybe we'll find out someday soon. Okay,
Real quick,
all for today.
if you, I don't know that anyone in here needs childcare, but it is